The display on top is a QD-OLED, the display at your bottom left is a WRGB OLED, and the display at your bottom right is a 1000 zone mini LED TV with IPS LCD panel. Most of your eyeballs will probably be drawn to the QD-OLED. It's brighter and more colorful than the WRGB OLED in bright scenes, and doesn't exhibit any grayish blacks or blooming artifacts which affects the mini LED LCD TV in dark scenes. But was this private demo prepared by Samsung Display, the only supplier of QD-OLED panels on the market, a valid comparison? Let me give you as much detail as I can, so that you can make up your own mind. So, as far as I've been told, the QD-OLED display used in this comparison was a final production panel. It's not an actual television, just a finalized panel that's been hooked up to a board with an SoC. The WRGB OLED was an LG G1, a 2021 flagship 4K OLED with EVO technology. The mini LED TV chosen for this comparison was an LG QNED90, for obvious reasons. Samsung Display couldn't use a Samsung Neo QLED, that would be attacking its own brand, and using a Sony LED LCD television was out of the question, since Sony is a valued client of Samsung Display, being one of the first manufacturers to commit to QD-OLED. All three displays were 65 inches in screen size, and the first caveat you need to know is that all were uncalibrated and running in their respective dynamic or vivid picture modes, so very little conclusion could be drawn from the comparison demo at Samsung Display's private booth, due to different color temperature and tone mapping approaches, among other variables. In fact, the QD-OLED panel appeared to be following an over-brightened PQ-EOTF tracking, which is typical of Samsung televisions, resulting in more clipping of bright highlight detail. In my professional opinion, a fairer comparison would be to get all the televisions calibrated, and then benchmarked against a reference mastering monitor such as the Sony X300 or HX310 to see the difference. Not an easy task, I know. Perhaps one for a former professional calibrator who has extensive experience with such things. Caveat number 2 was that the QD-OLED comparison was done against 2021 models, which is totally understandable since 2022 models are not going to be available to buy for some time yet. However, the OLED EX technology that LG Display announced just before CES for 2022 WRGB OLEDs should deliver 200 nits full screen white with generally brighter APL, thus making it a closer fight. For its 65-inch QD-OLED panels, Samsung Display quotes white luminance figures of 200 nits full screen, 1000 nits on a 10% window, and 1500 nits on a 3% window. But those were probably measured at the panel's native white point, which is bluer, and so once calibrated to the industry standard of D65 white point, it's unlikely that these numbers would be significantly brighter than 2022 WRGB OLED televisions, considering that even last year's Sony A90J and Panasonic JZ2000 managed to hit 1300 nits in dynamic mode, albeit for no longer than 10 seconds. And caveat number 3 was that the demo loop was specifically selected by Samsung Display to showcase the benefits of QD-OLED over WRGB OLED. Again, this is standard practice among manufacturers. If I am standing right beside Henry Cavill, it is not in my interest to start comparing jawlines. Instead, I'll put on a mask to partially hide my face, whip out my meter, and try to win a calibration competition. Despite these caveats, I saw 3 distinct advantages offered by QD-OLED over WRGB OLED. 1. The QD-OLED display was definitely able to paint more saturated colors at higher luminance than the LG G1, and the white subpixel dilution effect on WRGB OLED televisions isn't something that can be overcome by just cranking up the color control without affecting the naturalness of the picture elsewhere. 2. The QD-OLED managed to preserve off-axis luminance and colors even better than the LG G1, thanks to QD-OLED's top emission display characteristics and dome-shaped flux structure. Now, I'll be the first to say that viewing angle is not something that current OLED television owners are complaining about, so it seems that QD-OLED is inventing a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. But with more and more WRGB OLED televisions carrying the latest generation WBE panels, which manifest a noticeable pink tint off-axis, I do wonder if QD-OLED can resolve this issue. Unfortunately, I couldn't test the QD-OLED panel at Samsung Display's private booth with full field white, and so we'll have to wait until I get my hands on a review sample to confirm either way. And 3. The QD-OLED screen was less reflective than the LG G1, as you can see when I showed my camera light back and forth between the two displays. Samsung Display explained that QD-OLED's low reflectivity was again courtesy of its top emission structure, avoiding the need to have an additional layer on top which can introduce more reflections. By supplying a QD-OLED panel with inherently low reflectivity, Samsung Display said it is providing more flexibility for display manufacturers to implement their own surface treatment to the final product should they choose to do so. For example, Dell has put an almost glossy finish on the Alienware AW3423DW. That's a mouthful. QD-OLED monitor, since a glossy screen is generally preferable to a matte screen which tends to dampen contrast and colors when hit by light, even though there are less reflections. All in all, I'm very excited by the raw potential of QD-OLED TV, but will reserve full judgment until I get the chance to run my own test and side-by-side comparison against a WRGB OLED TV from the same model year. Regardless of my eventual findings, there's no need for WRGB OLED owners to have buyer's remorse, or for you to put off buying a WRGB OLED TV this year. Being a first-generation product, the initial batch of QD-OLED televisions is expected to be very expensive. Korean media has estimated the price of a Samsung QD-OLED TV to be north of 10 million won, which converts to more than 8,000 US dollars or 6,000 Great British pounds. Although at CES, Samsung Display has hinted that prices won't be as high as those guesstimates bandied about. Also, because of a 9-year head start and economies of scale, WRGB OLED is available in more screen sizes, ranging from a gaming-friendly 42 inches to a massive 97 inches, whereas QD-OLED is currently only limited to 55-inch and 65-inch sizes for televisions and a 34-inch screen size for monitors. At Samsung Display's private booth, we also checked out the world's first QD-OLED monitor, including some comparisons versus the LG EP950 True RGB OLED monitor, so go watch our coverage video here.